So I've been a little bit critical of Neil Gaiman these last couple of days simply because of his really Hollywood shield campaign of coming out there and saying the reason why fans hate the Rings of Power is because they don't like black people, they don't like women of color, they don't like just women in general, all these different things that you've heard for I don't know, the last decade. When something doesn't go Hollywood's way when it comes to a really big movie or series, they try to say, well, it's not our fault for making bad television or bad movies. It's your fault for not liking it because you're a fill in the blank. But I will say this, I did think, I still am a gigantic fan of Neil Gaiman. I think he's done fabulous work over the years. I think he creates really interesting characters, and I did enjoy the Sandman adaptation that was on Netflix. But I did think this one article was pretty interesting. It says Neil Gaiman admits to sabotaging first attempt at the Sandman live action adaptation. It was the worst script that I've ever read. Now, before I get into this, let me just tell you my personal thoughts when it came to the Sandman Netflix adaptation. I thought the first half of it was absolutely brilliant. I thought the second half of it felt like a completely different season and a completely different show. I kind of wish that they would have, maybe gone with the Corinthian as the main villain of this year, of this season. And unfortunately, we ended up getting like 3 villains all at once. And I thought that was just a little bit too much for this show. And it really felt disjointed towards the very end. But I will say I did, for the most part, enjoy this series. But anyways, it says, creator of the Sandman, Neil Gaiman, had chances to adapt the spooky comic before Netflix came calling, but he was very choosy about the hands he'd allowed to touch his characters. He revealed to Rolling Stone that his protectiveness got to the extreme of outright sabotaging production, which is what happened when a proposed adaptation entered development hell 2 decades ago. The sabotage began when the author leaked the script, which he hated, to the once popular outlet Ain't It Cool News. I sent the script to Ain't It Cool News, which back then was read by people, he said. Well, that's kind of mean. And I thought, I wonder what Ain't It Cool News will think of the script that they're going to receive anonymously. Gaiman continued, and they wrote a fabulous article about how it was the worst script they'd ever been sent, and suddenly the prospect of that film happening went away. Gaiman had reasons to breathe a sigh of relief. The film was being produced by one of the most notorious names in Hollywood, John Peters, the man behind Tango and Cash, Wild Wild West, and The Abandoned Superman Lives. Essential elements of the story were there, such as Morpheus taking his gas mask looking helm, his ruby, and a bag of sand. Lucifer and the Corinthian were in it too, and they were also after the magical objects that were lost and scattered. Ain't it cool? And Gaiman agreed that those pieces didn't come together and weren't afraid to let everyone know the script wasn't any good. Even people at the studio, it was the worst script that I've ever read by anybody. You know what? It just kind of makes me wonder why he was so cool with the script this go around. Because, look, I'll admit there was some really brilliant aspects to this season of the Sandman, but man, that second half just felt so disjointed. I'm kind of wondering why he didn't maybe ask for changes or kind of bring that up and say, hey, maybe the end of this doesn't fit so well with the narrative that we have going in the first half of it. I just wonder how much he had to say in that, and whether or not I guess he must have liked it or not found any problem with it. But I will say that, and I've heard that from numerous people. It's not just me saying that second half it was decent, but it didn't fit in with the narrative of the first half. I'm just curious as why maybe he didn't have more say into what happened in that. But I guess he must have just liked it. I don't know. Yeah, he said, recalling a conversation he had with Peters' office, a guy in John Peters' office phoned me up and he said, "So, Neil, have you had a chance to read the script we sent you?" And I said, "Well, yes, I did. I haven't read all of it, but I've read enough." Gaiman adds, he says, "So pretty good, huh?" And I said, "Well, no, it really isn't." He said, "Oh, come on. There must have been some stuff in there that you loved." I said, "There was nothing in there I loved. There was nothing in there I liked." He would emphatically clarify, "It was the worst script that I've ever read by anybody. It's not just the worst Sandman script. That was the worst script I've ever been sent." Wow, that's actually saying something. Because I know they probably get a lot of scripts from a lot of proposed adaptions of their work, especially somebody like Neil Gaiman. Gaiman explained the plot for Peters' Sandman, which has more in common with the Arnold Schwarzenegger supernatural action or End of Days and the Y2K scare. They were a family of identical brothers, and it was all a race to see who could get the ruby, the helm, and the bag of sand before midnight in 1999, before the new millennium starts, because whoever got it would be the winner, he revealed. This was the plot. That almost kind of sounds like Highlander to a certain extent. In another humorous twist, there happened to be a giant mechanical spider like the one in Wild Wild West. Peters infamously pushed for the same thing to be in Superman Lives, inspiring the picture's initial director Kevin Smith to make an early example of a meme out of this request by retelling his story of making the film. So basically, this guy's a hack and didn't really know how to make this film, and he just kind of used the same idea for each one of his films. It says, before the sands of the hourglass trickled down to Netflix, other adaptions of the Sandman were in the works of the years, one of which was set to star Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Morpheus. Oh, I would not have liked that. I really liked the Morpheus that they had in this. I just wish maybe he would have had a little bit more lines. But maybe that was probably why I liked him so much, is because he had very few lines and he was very mysterious. Nothing came of that clearly, although Gaiman did get behind it. Ah, man, I cannot imagine getting behind that. I would have not have liked that adaptation. I really like the one that they've got now. I'll tell you, I liked a lot of the side characters in the adaptation that they made for Netflix. I love Death. Oh my goodness. I thought the Death episode in this was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I even love that kind of like bar scene with the guy that, couldn't die. That was awesome too. I love those little stories within it more than I enjoyed the overall arc in a lot of different ways. But I love the family, the kind of weird family setting of, that little home that the main characters were staying in the second half. I wish they would have been incorporated into the first half. I think that would have made this show just spectacular in so many different ways if that part was in the first half of this. But overall, I didn't really enjoy the family element, though. I didn't enjoy, the hunt for the brother and all that. I didn't really like that aspect of it. And I really didn't like the whole, the convention for serial killers. Thought that was a little bit over the top. But I will say it did kind of end in a really interesting way. So overall, I'm excited about season 2 of The Sandman. And I'm glad that he was picky about who he chose to make this film or this series, because I think he's got the right people and I think he's got something really interesting going forward. I just hope Netflix doesn't do what Netflix does best, and that's ruin series down the road, because Netflix has had a lot of great series over time. Frontier, Altered Carbon, all of these series, and by the time it got to the second season, it was utter trash. So let's hope that they don't do that with this, and let's hope that Neil Gaiman stays out of other people's works. when it comes to trying to protect it and attacking fans. Let's hope that happens. I hope for Neil Gaiman's sake that happens, because I really am a big fan of his. I really am. I think he does amazing work, but I just don't want him to be this typical Hollywood guy that anytime something happens in Hollywood, they bring out all these actors and actresses that have nothing to do with that particular project and go out there and just attack fans just to attack fans without really hearing their side or understanding their point of view. And I'll admit, I was kind of that way when it comes to Cowboy Bebop. I wasn't a real big Cowboy Bebop anime fan. So when I watched the series, I was like, okay, this is actually a fairly decent series. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I was hoping for a second season. Well, of course, fans come out in droves and they said, hey, we don't want this. This isn't like the original work. And I, as someone who wasn't a fan of the anime, I respected that. And I was like, hey, you know what? If the fans, the true fans of Cowboy Bebop don't want this, they shouldn't make a second season. And I'm glad that the studio actually listened and was like, no, we're not going to make a second season out of this because fans aren't having it. I wish that more studios was like that. I wish there was more Sonic the Hedgehogs out there where that fans see something and fans are like, oh, I don't like it. And then production team goes in there and is like, well, they don't like it, so we're going to go in there and change it before we release it. I think that would actually be a really great idea to do, Hollywood. Maybe you would get more hits out there instead of more criticism. But Hollywood is not really introspective in so many different ways. But anyways, guys, let me know what y'all think of this. Are y'all as happy as I am that they went with this version of Neil Gaiman's The Sandman? Or do you think maybe some of those ideas from the past might have been interesting to see? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and y'all take care.